Alright, I need to spill about this terrifying thing that went down last summer. I'm 25, and me and my buddy Mike love camping. We grew up in this rural part of Oregon, so we're used to the woods. Fishing, hiking, all that. My mom always said, don't trust strangers out there, people can be nuts. But I figured we were two big guys, we'd be fine. Last July, we planned a weekend trip to this campsite a couple hours from home, up in the mountains. It was off the beaten path, no cell service, just a few spots by a lake. We were stoked for some beers, a campfire, and chilling with nature, you know? We got there Friday afternoon, set up our tent, and cracked open some cold ones. The campsite had maybe 5 other groups, all spread out, so it felt private. We noticed this one guy at a site across the lake, maybe 200 yards away. He was alone, older, like 50s, with a big beard and a beat-up RV. He kept to himself, tinkering with his gear, so we didn't think much of it. Mike's like, that dude's probably just a hardcore outdoorsman, and we laughed it off. We spent the day fishing, swimming, and messing around, no worries. That night, we're by our fire roasting hot dogs when I notice a flashlight bobbing across the lake, near that guy's RV. It's moving toward us, slow but steady. I point it out to Mike, and he's like, probably just someone walking their dog. But it keeps coming, cutting through the trees, straight for our sight. My gut's starting to twist. Kazu walks across a dark campsite at midnight. Mom's warnings are ringing in my ears, but I tell myself to chill. The light gets closer, and it's the RV guy. He steps into our firelight, holding a flashlight and a hunting knife casual-like, but it's freaking me out. He's got this weird smile and goes, "Evening, boys. Mind if I join you?" Mike, being Mr. Friendly, says, "Sure, grab a seat." But I'm shooting him daggers, like, what the hell, dude? The guy sits on a log, knife still in his hand, and starts asking all these questions: where we're from, how long we're staying, if we got anyone else with us. I'm keeping my answers short, saying, just here for the weekend, just us, trying to sound chill but feeling like a deer in headlights. He starts telling these stories about hunting, but they're dark. Like how he tracks game for days, how easy it is to lose something in these woods. His eyes are locked on us, and he's twirling that knife, not threatening, but not threatening, you know? I'm gripping my beer can so hard it's dented, and Mike's finally picking up the vibe, going quiet. The guy asks if we got any weapons, just for safety. I lie saying, nah, just fishing gear, even though I got a hatchet in the tent. He smirks and says, smart. Never know who's out here. After like 20 minutes, he stands up, says, well, I'll let you sleep, and walks off, flashlight bobbing back across the lake. Mike's like, that was weird, right? And I'm like, no shit, man, he had a damn knife. We douse the fire and crawl into the tent, but I ain't sleeping. I'm listening for every snap of a twig, wondering if he's coming back. Around 3 a.m., I hear footsteps, heavy, deliberate, circling our sight. I nudge Mike, who's half asleep, and whisper, you hear that? He bolts upright, and we sit there frozen as the steps get closer, then fade away. I'm clutching the hatchet, ready to swing if that guy tries anything. Morning comes, and we're exhausted but alive. We check around the tent, and there's boot prints in the dirt, big ones, not ours. My heart's in my throat. We pack up fast, deciding to cut the trip short. As we're loading the car, I see the guy by his RV, watching us, no expression. He raises a hand, like a wave, but it feels like a warning. We peel out, not saying much on the drive home. I'm checking the rearview mirror the whole way, half expecting his RV to show up. When we get back, I tell my mom, and she's like, I told you to be careful. She made me promise to stick to busier campsites. I looked up the area later, and there have been reports of thefts and assaults at remote sites, but no arrests. I keep thinking about that guy's knife, his questions, those footsteps. Was he just a creepy loner, or was he planning something worse? Me and Mike don't talk about it much, but we ain't gone camping since. I'm still spooked, wondering what he was after and why he picked us. No more backwoods trips for me, man, that's for damn sure. I was 23, working this crummy part-time job at a gas station in this small town about an hour from the city. It was one of those 24-hour joints off the interstate with a mini-mart that sold overpriced snacks and smokes. I took the late shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., because it paid a bit more, and I was saving up to move out of my parents' place. My dad was always like, be careful out there, people get weird at night. But I figured it was just drunk truckers or tired commuters, nothing I couldn't handle. Man, was I wrong. The station was kinda isolated, with fields on one side and a sketchy motel across the road. We had these old cameras that barely worked, and the manager, Dave, was too cheap to fix them. My job was to stock shelves, ring up customers, and keep the place clean. Most nights were dead, maybe a few folks grabbing gas or a soda. I blast music on my phone to stay awake, keeping my pocket knife in my apron because Dad insisted. I never had to use it, but it made me feel safer. About 3 months into the job, this guy started showing up. He was maybe in his 30s, tall, skinny, with greasy hair and a patchy beard. He drove this rusted-out pickup, always parked at the furthest pump, even when others were open. The first time, he came in around 1 a.m., bought a pack of cheap cigarettes, and just stared at me while I rang him up. His eyes were all intense, like he was studying me. I smiled, trying to be polite, and said, "Have a good night." He didn't say nothing, just nodded and left. I thought, okay, weird dude, but whatever. He started coming in every few nights, always late, always buying cigarettes or a coffee. He'd linger by the counter, asking random stuff like, "You work here alone?" or "What time you get off?" I dodged the question, saying stuff like, "Oh, my coworker's in the back," even though it was just me. My gut was screaming he was bad news, but I didn't have proof, so I just stayed friendly but firm. I told Dave about him, but he was like, as long as he pays, don't make a fuss. Useless. One night, around 2:30 a.m., things got real bad. It was pouring rain, and the station was empty. I was mopping the floor when I saw his pickup pull in, parking at that far pump like always. He didn't get out right away, just sat there, engine running, headlights pointed at the store. I could feel him watching me through the glass. My heart started racing, and I grabbed my phone, ready to call someone, anyone, if he tried something. After like 10 minutes, he got out, walked in, soaking wet, and bought his usual cigarettes. He leaned on the counter, closer than normal, and said, "You look tired." "Long night, huh? Bet you can't wait to get home." His voice was all slimy, and I forced a laugh, saying, "Yeah, always busy." I rang him up fast, praying he'd leave, but he didn't. He stood there, twirling his keys, and goes, "I know you live on Oak Street, right? Seen you driving that blue Civic." My blood went cold. I lived on Oak, and my car was a blue Civic parked out back. I hadn't told him nothing about me, and I always checked to make sure no one followed me home. I played dumb, saying, "Nah, you got the wrong person," but my voice was shaking. He smirked, like he knew I was lying, and said, Sure. See you around." Then he walked out slow as hell, back to his truck. I locked the door the second he was gone, something we weren't supposed to do, but screw that. I called my friend Jake, who lived nearby, and begged him to come hang out till my shift ended. Jake showed up 20 minutes later, and I told him everything, freaking out. We watched the cameras, but the guy's truck was gone. Jake stayed till 6 a.m., and I drove home with him tailing me, paranoid as hell. I barely slept, jumping at every noise, wondering how that creep knew where I lived. The next night, I was a wreck going to work. I brought my dad's old baseball bat and kept it under the counter. Around midnight, I saw headlights pull into the lot, but it wasn't his truck. It was a different car, a black SUV. It parked by the pumps, but no one got out. I watched it for like 15 minutes, my hands sweaty, then called Dave, who was pissed I woke him up. He told me to stop being dramatic, but I wasn't taking chances. I kept the door locked and stayed behind a counter, bat in hand. At 1 a.m., the SUV's door opened, and it was him. Same guy, different car. He walked up to the door, tried the handle, and when it didn't open, he banged on the glass hard. "Hey, open up. I need smokes," he yelled. I shouted back, "We're closed till morning." Total lie, but I wasn't letting him in. He stood there, staring through the glass, then started pacing, muttering to himself. My heart was in my throat, and I called 911, whispering that some guy was acting threatening. He must have seen me on the phone, cause he bolted to his SUV and peeled out. The cops showed up 20 minutes later, took my statement, but said they couldn't do much without a license plate or a name. I quit the next day. Dave was mad, but I didn't care. I moved back with my parents for a bit, too scared to be alone. I kept seeing SUVs everywhere, wondering if it was him. I still don't know how he found out where I lived or what he wanted, but the way he looked at me like he was planning something, it haunts me. I ain't working no late-night job again. No way. I'm an American-born woman, but my mom was born in South Africa. She moved to the U.S. in the 90s, and growing up, she always drilled into me and my sister the need to be on guard, to stay cautious. It was little things, like when we pull up to an ATM at night. While Mom was using the machine, I'd be glued to one window, scanning for anyone approaching, and my sister would watch the other. We were like little sentries, making sure no one snuck up on us. That kind of vigilance was just part of how she raised us. I'd always dreamed of visiting South Africa, though. It was this far-off place tied to my family, and when I turned 17, I got the chance as a graduation gift. I ended up staying with my grandparents, who were both in their late 70s. My grandfather's Alzheimer's was getting worse, and traveling was tough on him, but my grandmother, she was determined to show me as much of the country as she could. Nothing was stopping her. So we packed up and hit the road, driving from Johannesburg toward Cape Town. The drives were long, sometimes 6 hours at a stretch. If you've ever been to South Africa, you know how it is miles and miles of nothing but grass. It was breathtaking in a way, but also kind of eerie. Just endless open space, with barely another car in sight. As we got closer to the Cape, we started passing these signs warning drivers not to pull over for people selling grapes. We were near vineyards, and apparently folks would steal grapes and try to sell them on the roadside. It seemed harmless enough, but it stuck in my mind. By day 3 or 4, my grandfather was getting restless. He was fixated on the car's GPS, plugging it in, unplugging it, muttering curses under his breath as it kept glitching. That thing was driving us all nuts, repeating, recalculating, over and over for hours. I was losing my patience and tried to grab it from him to fix it, but he wouldn't let me near it. Finally, my grandmother had enough. She pulled the car over onto this narrow stretch of road, lined with trees on both sides. It was probably mid-afternoon, but it felt strangely quiet. No other cars, no sounds, just us. My grandparents were bickering over the GPS instructions when my grandmother turned to me in the back seat and said, watch out the back window." I couldn't help but smile to myself, remembering all those times my mom made us do the same thing. It felt like her voice echoing through Grandma. I glanced at my phone, no service, of course, and started scrolling through my camera roll for what felt like the 300th time that day. Just killing time. Then, out of nowhere, I looked up and turned toward the back window. My heart stopped. A man had stepped out of the trees and was sprinting straight at our car, full speed. I froze for a split second before I found my voice and screamed, "Go!" My grandmother didn't hesitate. Her instincts kicked in, and she floored it. The car lurched forward, and we peeled out, leaving the man standing in the dust behind us. As we sped away, my grandmother explained, her voice calm but serious. She said it's common for travelers to pull over for grape sellers, and sometimes there are people hiding in the trees, waiting to rob you or worse. They take advantage of folks who stop, especially when you're vulnerable. And let's be real, a teenage girl and an elderly couple, one with Alzheimer's? We were about as vulnerable as it gets. My heart was still racing, but all I could think was, thank you, Mom. All those years of her teaching me to stay cautious, to keep my eyes peeled, had paid off. That moment could have gone so wrong if we hadn't been ready to bolt. I don't know what that man wanted, but I'm just glad we didn't stick around to find out. When I was in grade school, my family lived in a small mountain town, about 29,000 people, tucked away in a quiet corner of the world. Just half a mile down the street from our house was this creepy compound that everyone whispered about. It was owned by a group of Satanists, or so the rumors went. Being raised in a religious family, the idea of these people living so close was downright unsettling. The compound itself was shrouded in mystery. Nobody really knew much about it. Only a few members seemed to live on the property full-time, but you'd see cars coming and going at odd hours, especially at night, and they wouldn't always come back. My dad and some others in town even suspected that a few of these folks might have blended into local churches, posing as regular members, but nobody could ever prove it. The whole thing just gave you the creeps, knowing they were out there, hidden in plain sight. One Halloween, my sister, her friend, and I went trick-or-treating around the neighborhood. Her friend was upset, going on about how his cat had gone missing. He was convinced it had wandered onto the cult's property and that they might have done something awful to it. Word around town was that this group had a nasty habit of killing stray cats that got inside their walls. People said they'd hang the poor animals from trees, like some kind of twisted ritual. Being a huge animal lover, I couldn't just let that slide. So I got this bright idea to sneak onto the compound to see if we could spot his cat among the ones they'd supposedly hung up. The compound was surrounded by high walls, but there were trees nearby we could use to climb over. They had motion sensor lights rigged up, so we had to be super careful not to set them off. Once we made it over the wall, we stuck close to the trees, moving slowly to get a better look. Sure enough, there were cats hanging from the branches. Some looked like they'd been there for a while, rotting and grim, while others seemed fresher, almost like they were being used as decorations or warnings. It was sickening. My sister's friend finally spotted his cat among them, and you could see the anger and sadness hit him like a ton of bricks. He got all emotional, almost erratic, and started talking about storming up to their church building, where he could hear some kind of service or gathering going on. I managed to talk him down from that reckless idea, but he was still fuming. Instead, I suggested boosting him up to peek through a small high window at the back of their church to see what was going on inside. The windows were tiny and way up there, so I had to hoist him up to get a look. After a few seconds, he let out this gasp and nearly fell off my shoulders. This kid had a flair for the dramatic, so I wasn't sure how seriously to take him, but he swore he saw a metal tray inside with severed human fingers and animal parts, probably cat parts, laid out on it. I didn't know what to believe, but the image he painted was horrifying. Before we could process it, he stumbled as he jumped down, and one of those motion lights flicked on. Almost instantly, people started pouring out of the building, charging toward us at full speed. My heart was pounding as we scrambled back over the wall, barely making it out without getting caught. My sister and brother were waiting on the other side, freaking out, asking what happened. We spilled everything to them, and later to the kid's mom. She only believed the part about the dead cats, though. She called the cops, but they brushed it off, saying the cult could do whatever they wanted with animals on their own property. She didn't even mention the severed fingers because she thought the kid was making it up. The police acted like the compound didn't even exist whenever anyone reported anything weird about it. Their motto seemed to be, just leave them alone. That night, we had to walk home, about 5 miles, because our ride fell through. As we were walking, I noticed a green Suburban driving by every 10 minutes or so, like it was keeping tabs on us. I started to panic, not wanting whoever it was to know where we lived, especially since my mom was away for the week on army duty. I told my brother we needed to lose them, so we started zigzagging through alleys and side streets. Eventually, the Suburban stopped showing up, and we made it home, shaken but safe. I never saw any of their faces or got a clear look at who they were, but knowing there were over 100 members of this group living among us in our little town, blending in was terrifying. We just never knew who they were. Last night, I was jolted awake by this heavy, raspy breathing. I was sleeping on my side, facing away from my boyfriend, who was out cold next to me in bed. The sound was so intense, like someone snoring right in my ear, and it came with this overwhelming feeling that we weren't alone in the room. My stomach dropped, and I felt this prickling unease crawl over me. I rolled over slowly, my heart already racing, and there it was, a figure standing over my boyfriend, just staring down at him, breathing heavily. The sight made my blood run cold. I didn't think, I just started yelling, "Go away. Leave him alone." I don't even remember exactly what I screamed because I was half asleep and absolutely terrified. Instinct kicked in, and I threw myself over my boyfriend, shielding him as I reached for the lamp on the nightstand. I flicked it on, my hand shaking, and when I looked back, the figure was gone. Just vanished. My boyfriend woke up to me in full-on hysterics, sobbing my eyes out, which is not like me at all. I hardly ever cry. He was trying to calm me down, asking what the heck happened. I was babbling, trying to explain about the figure and the breathing, when the light suddenly turned off by itself. That lamp has never done that before. My heart was in my throat, and I begged my boyfriend to grab his phone and turn on a flashlight to give us some light. As he reached for it, the lamp flicked back on, all on its own. I was shaking, barely holding it together, and we just sat there staring at each other, trying to make sense of it. I've lived in this apartment for 11 years, and nothing like this has ever happened. But my boyfriend, he's got a history with weird stuff. He's told me stories about waking up feeling like something was pressing him into the bed, heavy and suffocating. Once he yelled, "Get off me," and whatever it was lifted, but he heard scratching noises on the bed frame, loud enough that his wife at the time heard it too. That's another thing, my boyfriend is a widower. His wife passed away suddenly from a blood clot almost 2 years ago, with no warning. About a month before she died, his best friend dropped dead at his own birthday party from heart failure. It's been one tragedy after another for him. Even creepier, his wife told him she saw a figure in their bedroom one night while they were sleeping. She never got the chance to fully explain what she saw before she passed. Since we moved in together, strange things have been happening in this apartment. Stuff goes missing, keys, jewelry, random little things, and then shows up months later, sitting right in the middle of the room, like someone placed it there. Cabinets slam shut on their own, loud enough to make you jump. The thermostat gets turned up or down when we're not even near it. Our cats will just stop and stare at empty corners, their eyes locked on something we can't see. It's unsettling, to say the least. There's something else about my boyfriend that's been freaking me out. When he gets angry, it's like he becomes a different person. His eyes change, they look distant, almost empty, and his voice shifts, deeper and colder. He's never hurt me, and I don't think he ever would, but it's like something takes over him. It's not just him being mad, it's eerie, like he's not fully there. I've always believed in ghosts, but it was more of a passing thought, not something I ever expected to experience. This level of activity, if that's what you call it, has me rattled. The rational part of my brain is screaming for an explanation. Maybe it's stress, maybe I was dreaming, but I know what I saw. That figure was real, and the breathing was too loud to be my imagination. I'm on edge, my thoughts all over the place, and I'm just trying to make sense of it. My boyfriend's been through so much, and now this. I don't know what's going on in this apartment, but it's starting to feel like we're not alone. I was barely 16, growing up in a small, nowhere Midwestern town. It was one of those places with more cornfields than people, but it had a reputation for a while as the meth capital of America, which was its weird claim to fame. Anyway, out on this quiet paved country road, there was an old cemetery that everyone said was haunted. It had been vandalized recently, headstones tipped over, graffiti, that kind of thing, and the town was buzzing about it. Me and my friends Parker and Cody, two big testosterone-fueled football players, were hanging out one day, talking about the cemetery and speculating about who trashed it. I've always been a sucker for ghost stories and haunted places, plus I was in like 20 community service clubs, so I wanted to check it out to see how bad the damage was. Maybe one of my clubs could help clean it up. But being a total chicken, I figured I'd be safe with two linebacker-sized guys by my side. I mean, what ghost or meth head would mess with us, right? Seemed logical at the time. This all went down in the fall, sometime between 6 o'clock and 8 p.m. It was dark, but not super late. We got to the cemetery and were poking around, being respectful. No vandalism or anything stupid like that. We just wanted to scope out the damage and maybe, just maybe, to spot a ghost. We'd been there for about 10 minutes, checking out this old mausoleum, when a white, 90s-looking Jeep drove by on the road. It slowed down, like the driver was scoping out the place. From where we were, we could see the road through a window, but whoever was driving wouldn't have been able to see us, just our car parked nearby. My gut started screaming, though the way the Jeep crawled by felt off. I turned to Parker and Cody and said we should get out of there. As we looked out another window, we saw the Jeep turn around in a nearby driveway and start creeping back toward the cemetery. My stomach dropped. Cody and I bolted for the car, hearts pounding, and Parker followed, puffing himself up like he was ready to take on the world. We piled into the car, and just as we did, the Jeep did another slow drive-by. Parker, acting all tough, got in the driver's seat like he'd somehow scared the Jeep off. But then our faces turned to pure horror. The Jeep turned around again in the nearest driveway and started coming back. I was freaking out, on the verge of tears, yelling at Parker to just drive. He peeled out of the cemetery, tires screeching on the gravel, and we hit the road, passing the Jeep as we went. I vaguely remember Parker flipping the driver off as we sped by, which pissed me off. Like, why poke the bear, dude? And sure enough, the Jeep turned around and started tailing us, riding our bumper and flashing its brights. I was screaming at Parker for not leaving well enough alone, my mind racing with all the ways this could end badly. Cody in the back was giving us a play-by-play, watching the Jeep through the rear window. Parker decided to try and lose it, which was a terrible idea. We were on a straight, hilly road, nowhere to hide. He floored it, pushing 80 miles an hour, and the Jeep started to fall back a bit but kept up, still flashing its lights, still terrifying. We finally hit the main highway running through town, and Parker turned left onto a residential street, then cut left again into a church parking lot. He killed the headlights and parked behind a wooden playground fence, hoping we'd lost them. Cody said he could see the Jeep's lights on the next street over, so it seemed like we'd shaken them. But Parker, being Parker, got the brilliant idea to double-check. I was screaming at him like, "Have you never seen a horror movie? This is how we die." I just wanted to go home, but no, he drove down a street parallel to where the Jeep might have been. We didn't see it, so we turned back onto the main highway. Then, out of nowhere, cop lights flashed behind us. Parker pulled over, and I burst into tears, spilling the whole story to the officer. How some lunatic in a Jeep had chased us, how I thought we were going to die. Cody backed me up, confirming everything. The cop asked why we were at the cemetery, and I explained my name and my plan to help with a vandalism cleanup through one of my clubs. He didn't seem too concerned about the Jeep, though, and just told us to head home. So we did, shaken and exhausted. I don't know who was in that Jeep or why they chased us, but that night scared the hell out of me. This happened about 2 years ago when I was visiting Denver with my best friend, Danny. We'd rented a car for the week, excited to explore Colorado. We'd been to Denver a few times before, but we always headed north to check out the sights. This time we decided to switch it up and go south to Garden of the Gods. We spent a while wandering around the park, soaking in the massive red rock formations and snapping photos. It was gorgeous, but we wanted to see more of the area, so we hit the road again, ending up on this gravel road that wound over a mountain pass toward a town further north, heading back toward Denver. I think it might have been through Waldo Canyon, where there had been wildfires a few years back, but I'm not sure of the exact road name. Maybe someone local would know. We've been driving up the pass for a bit, stopping here and there to take pictures of the views. The road was quiet, no other people around, and we had no cell service, which wasn't surprising given how remote it felt. Eventually, we reached a flatter stretch to higher elevation, where the road leveled out before we'd start descending the other side of the mountain. We've been cruising along this flat part for about 10 or 15 minutes when Danny told me to stop the car. She'd spotted a couple of people up ahead, waving us down like they needed help or something. My gut twisted a bit. I've worked in hotels for years and dealt with plenty of sketchy folks, so I'm pretty good at picking up bad vibes, but I pulled over anyway, hesitant as hell. We rolled down the window as two older guys approached the car. The second they got close, my spidey senses went into overdrive. These dudes were off. They had that twitchy, strung-out look I'd seen on tweakers back at the hotel. Wild eyes, jittery movements, like something out of Deliverance. We asked what they wanted, and one of them pointed to a beat-up white van parked on the side of the road. He said they had a flat tire and needed a sledgehammer to knock it off. A sledgehammer? For a tire? That didn't add up. I told him we didn't have anything to help with a tire change, hoping to end the conversation right there. But then he switched his story, saying the van was out of gas and that his wife and baby were inside. He asked if we could give him a ride down the mountain. My heart was pounding now, and I was praying Danny was picking up on how shady this was. These guys were giving me the creeps, and their stories were all over the place. Thank God Danny didn't bite either. She stayed calm and told him we'd stop further down the mountain and let a ranger know they were stuck. That was it, conversation over. I rolled up the window, my hands shaking, and started driving, hauling ass down the gravel road as fast as I could without losing control. Danny looked at me and said, "Go faster. Don't stop for anything or anyone." She didn't need to tell me twice. I was already flooring it, kicking up dust as we went. We kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting that creepy van to start tailing us, but it didn't. After what felt like forever, we made it further down the mountain and spotted a ranger's truck. We pulled over and told the ranger everything. How these two guys seemed super off, how their stories didn't make sense, how they gave us the worst vibes. The ranger said they'd send someone up to check, but who knows if they actually did. The way those guys looked at us, the way they talked, all sly and twisted, it was like they were sizing us up. It's hands down one of the most unnerving encounters I've ever had, and I still get chills thinking about what might have happened if we'd stayed longer or offered them a ride. This happened back in 2014 when I was 19, and I ended up in a psych ward after trying to take my own life. A bit of background. I'm a woman, and at the time, I was coming off 3 years of bipolar medication, spiraling hard into substance abuse during my first year of college. All that new adult freedom went straight to my head, and I went a little wild. One night, I had a major breakdown, and that landed me in an adult psych ward for the first time. I've been in the minors ward as a teenager for similar episodes, but this was a whole different beast. The place was a mess, poorly managed, with nurses and doctors who seemed like they couldn't care less. Their whole deal was just to prescribe meds and get you out the door. When I got there, they led me to my room and didn't bother with any real introductions. The nurse just walked me in, looked at the other woman in the room, and said, "Hey, this is your new roommate," before leaving. The woman was Hispanic, maybe in her late 40s or early 50s, a little taller than me. She wouldn't look up from the floor, just kept her eyes glued to it, not saying a word or moving an inch when I said hi. I noticed she had a tattoo of a cartoonish red devil, but as a baby, which was kind of weird, but I figured I'd just leave her alone and stick to my side of the room. That first night was typical psych ward stuff. There was a group session before bed, but my roommate didn't say a peep, just stare at the floor the whole time, barely moving. It was unnerving, but I'd seen odd behavior in wards before, so I tried not to let it get to me. Later, while we were lining up for our meds, things got chaotic. One guy started banging on the glass door, smiling creepily while slamming his head against the window. Another guy behind him was screaming and jumping around like he was possessed. It felt like they were about to break through the door, but some orderlies came and dragged them away, their screams echoing down the halls. I was used to outbursts from my time in the minors' ward, yelling fights, that kind of thing, but this was different. These were adults with years of mental illness eating away at them, not just angry kids acting out. The unpredictability hit me hard, and for the first time, I felt genuinely scared. I could barely sleep that night, my nerves on edge. Then later that night, something woke me up. You know that fuzzy feeling when you're just barely conscious, not quite awake, but you haven't opened your eyes yet? That's where I was. I felt this pressure on my forehead, like someone was pressing down, and then I sensed sweat dripping onto my face. My heart started racing, and I forced my eyes open. There was my roommate standing over my bed, staring straight into my eyes. One hand was on my forehead, the other balled into a fist on my chest. She was speaking fast and erratic, and what I can only guess was tongues or something like it. Her eyes were blank, completely empty. No emotion, just this hollow stare. I was paralyzed, my mind blank with fear, not sure what to do or what she might do if I moved or screamed. We were alone in the room, and the nurse's station was way down the hall. She kept going, her voice getting louder and faster, wiping the sweat off my forehead with her hand while still muttering. I was freaking out, my body frozen as I tried to figure out if she was going to hurt me. Then she put both hands on my forehead, shaking me slightly as she started screaming. That's when a nurse finally burst in, looking more annoyed than concerned, like she was pissed she had to deal with this. She grabbed my roommate and pulled her off me, saying, "Don't worry, just go back to sleep," before escorting her out. I was shaking, my heart pounding, but somehow I managed to drift back to sleep eventually. The next day, my roommate was gone. I assumed they moved her to a more secure ward or something, because I didn't see her again. Luckily, I was discharged later that day. That whole experience stuck with me, a stark reminder to take care of my mental health so I never end up back in a place like that. I still wake up some nights with lingering anxiety, my heart racing, and I have to calm myself down to fall back asleep. That ward, that woman, the way she looked at me, it was terrifying, and I never want to go through anything like that again. I know I've got my own struggles, but seeing how much worse it could be keeps me grounded. I'm an 18-year-old guy, and I recently started an internship at a local metal foundry in the engineering department. My dream's always been to become an engineer, but honestly, this gig hasn't exactly been inspiring. All it's done is put a little extra cash in my pocket, $20 a day, which isn't bad for a high school kid, I guess, but it's boring as hell. I've been doing it for months, just showing up for 2 hours a day to look for parts and scribble down their serial numbers on a piece of paper. I told my internship director it's not exactly sparking my passion for engineering, but getting paid to be bored isn't the worst deal, so I've stuck with it. The foundry's in this old building, and there's some creepy history to it. Back in the day, like 100 years ago, it was a circus warehouse. The company I worked for bought it in the 70s, and most of the place has been redone, except for one room they call the loft. That's the only part still in its original state, where the circus used to keep their lions and other animals. No lions now, obviously, just shelves packed with machine parts, big and small, for the foundry. I've never been one to believe in ghosts. Never had any spooky experiences to make me think otherwise. But some weird stuff's been going on at this job. A couple times while I was working in a tool crib, a big room with shelves and parts everywhere, I saw this strange woman sitting in the one chair we've got in there. She was dressed in old-fashioned clothes, like something from a history book, just sitting quietly, sipping something from a cup. She never said a word to me, and I didn't say anything to her. I figured she was just some random employee I hadn't met yet, so I mentioned her to my supervisor. He looked at me like I was nuts and said he had no clue who I was talking about. With around 400 people working at the foundry, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just someone from another shift. Not everyone here is exactly high class, and some folks aren't the sharpest if you catch my drift, so I didn't think much of it. But then something happened that really got to me. I was up in the loft one day, hunting for a part. It's this big, dim room with no windows, just shelves stacked with dusty equipment. Out of nowhere, the lights flickered and went out. Pitch black. A second later, they popped back on, so I didn't think much of it. Old building, probably just a glitch. But then this smell hit me, like an old barn filled with animals and manure, just rank and overpowering. It came out of nowhere. Before I could process it, the lights went out again, and this time they stayed off. The room was so dark, I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. Then I heard the door slowly creaking shut. My heart started pounding. I was hoping this was just my supervisor pulling a mean prank or something, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Then I heard it, a low, eerie growl, faint but chilling, like it was coming from somewhere deep in the room. The air turned ice cold, and I was shivering, not just from the temperature, but from straight-up fear. I stood there frozen as these strange sounds started up, like chains rattling softly. My pulse was through the roof, and I couldn't move, couldn't think. I was just waiting for something to happen, something bad. Then, all of a sudden, the door swung open, and the lights flicked back on. There was my supervisor standing in the doorway, looking confused. He asked me what I was doing up there with the lights off and why I was so sweaty. I must have looked like a mess standing there, pale and shaken, dripping with sweat. That was it for me. I decided right then that $20 a day wasn't worth it. I quit the internship not long after. I didn't tell anyone the real reason, just said the job was boring and maybe engineering wasn't for me. I couldn't bring myself to talk about what happened in the loft. It was too weird, too unsettling. I still don't know what I experienced up there, but it was enough to make me never want to step foot in that place again. Being a delivery driver is often called one of the most dangerous jobs out there, and I'd heard all the horror stories. Drivers getting lured to abandoned houses, stabbed, or even shot. But I was a college sophomore, and the idea of driving around, blasting music, satisfying my nicotine cravings, and exploring new roads while getting paid sounded like a dream. The potential dangers didn't really sink in. I figured I'd be fine, especially since I'd be delivering in a wealthier business district with low crime. After quitting my last job to focus on a heavy course load, I needed something to fill my summer, so I applied to the first delivery place I found, got hired, and was pumped to start. It was just a 13-minute commute from my house, and I'd be delivering in a nearby town I wasn't too familiar with. At first, everything was smooth. No one at the job warned me about anything sketchy, and there weren't any creepy stories from management or the other drivers. It was just me cruising around, dropping off food, and enjoying the vibe. That is, until about 6 months in, when I had a delivery shift that shook me to my core and ended up changing the company's policies. It was a normal night, and I was sent on a delivery to a neighboring city, about a 15-minute drive. The area had these small apartment complexes with a confusing numbering system, and I thought my GPS had taken me to the right lot. But when I pulled in, I couldn't find the apartment number on the order. There was a nice-looking guy walking his dog nearby, so I rolled down my window and asked if this was 22 whatever street. He was super chatty, saying, "No, sorry, this place can be a maze." Before I could ask for directions, he started firing off questions. Way too many for comfort. He noticed I was delivering food and asked what it was, if I had a menu, what time we stopped delivering, and if I was the only driver working that Sunday night. I hadn't put the delivery sign on my car, so his curiosity felt a little off, but I answered quickly, trying to be polite. I said I was in a rush and asked if he could point me in the right direction. He wasn't sure but offered to walk his dog up the road while I drove, saying he'd help me figure it out. We navigated for a minute or two, and he pointed me to the right spot. I thanked him, flashed a smile, and said, "Feel free to call us for a delivery, and I'll be back with your food in no time." He seemed thrilled about the idea of delivery, asking again for a menu, so I handed him one, and that was that. I found the apartment, dropped off the order, and headed back. The delivery window closed at 9 p.m., but if an order came in just before, I'd be stuck driving until at least 10 o'clock. Sure enough, at 9:20 another order came in, and I left with it at 9:40, running on autopilot, just following the GPS without paying much attention. As I got closer, I realized the address looked familiar. It was that same street from earlier. My GPS said, turn left in 0.2 miles, and it hit me this had to be the guy who helped me out. I pulled into the lot, parked, and walked up to the door. I knocked, hearing faint music inside that got louder, along with some laughter. I rang the doorbell, and the same guy opened the door, both of us smiling like we were old pals. Guess you decided cooking wasn't for you tonight, huh? I said, trying to keep things light and friendly. He laughed and said something like, cooking's a waste of time. I think raw food's the most authentic way to eat. I chuckled, thinking, okay, this guy's a bit of a weirdo, but I didn't dwell on it. He insisted I step inside to put the bags down in his kitchen. Normally, I don't go into customers' homes. It's an in-and-out job, but it wasn't unheard of, so I went along with it. Then he told me to take off my shoes. That threw me off. I'd never been asked to do that on a delivery, and it felt weird, like I was being invited to stay and hang out, which was not the vibe I was going for. I figured maybe he was just OCD about his floors, so I slipped off my shoes, my eyes catching this odd rug by the shoe rack. It looked like it was made of black feathers or something. At the same time, the music he was playing was giving me this uneasy feeling, like I'd heard it before in some creepy context. It was almost like deja vu, but not quite, just enough to make my skin crawl. I followed him to the kitchen counter and set the bags down next to this weird setup that looked like a stuffed crow in some kind of nativity scene. He caught me staring and said, "Did you know when a crow dies, 100 live ones will gather for a ceremony? It's how they learn about threats, and they avoid places where they've seen a dead crow." I nodded, pulling out the payment slip for him to sign, and said, "That's interesting," trying to keep things moving. As he signed, he kept going, saying we could learn a lot from crow behavior. I thanked him for signing and started heading for the door, ready to get out of there, saying I'd have to look into that crow stuff, hoping to shut down the conversation. As I was putting my shoes back on, he stopped me with, "Hey, one last thing. If I told you someone was killed here, would you be hesitant to come back? If I said I was responsible, would you revisit this place?" My heart stopped. I didn't even look at him. I just grabbed my stuff, bolted out the door, and sped back to work, my mind racing with a million thoughts. I barely slept for the next couple of nights, replaying his words. Looking back, it felt like he was testing me, like he saw something in me that made him want to know if I was the only driver working. After I told him our delivery hours, it's like he timed his order to make sure he'd be my last stop of the night. I still think about what he might have been planning every time I'm on a shift. That encounter haunted me for months, and it was enough to make the company rethink some of their late-night delivery policies. I'm just glad I got out of there when I did. Back in 2015, when I was 22, I moved to Japan from the UK to study. It was my first time living alone, and I was thrilled to be in a country I'd always dreamed about. The apartment I got was through a company tied to my school, but man, it was tiny. Like one room with a kitchen right next to the bed. I could cross the whole place in about 10 steps. I didn't know much about Japanese apartments back then, so I didn't realize how crummy it was for the price. It was one of 5 options they gave me before I moved, and I just picked one, excited to start this new chapter. About a month in, I met my boyfriend at the time, and he warned me that the area I lived in wasn't great, known for some shady characters. He told me not to walk alone at night, especially not with headphones in, and to stay alert. I kicked myself for all the times I'd stumbled home drunk from clubs, a 30-minute walk, totally oblivious. Japan's generally super safe, but not always for women living alone, and that reality hit me hard. I'd been there for 6 months when my best friend, who lived in the apartment to my right, moved back to England. That left me feeling a bit exposed, especially because I'd already noticed the neighbor on my left was weird. I'd never seen his face, but I could tell when he was home because he'd constantly clear his throat, like he was hacking up something gross. It was so loud it sounded like he was right outside my door, even though his place was a bit down the hall. My apartment was on the top floor, at the end of a hallway. To the left of my door were stone stairs that led up to nothing, just a dead end. Past those stairs was his apartment, and beyond that, another hallway with stairs going down to the laundry room. I avoided those stairs because they were crawling with spiders, so I always used the ones on my right, at the end of the hall, to come and go. The laundry stairs were only used by a few people, like my creepy neighbor and a Chinese couple who lived further down. After my friend left, I started noticing this guy more. His door had a peephole that glowed yellow when his light was on, so I could tell if he was home. My peephole was busted from the previous tenant, so he couldn't see if I was in or not, which I liked. But his throat clearing was so loud, I felt like he was haunting my space. At first, I didn't think much of it, thin walls, right? But then I noticed something creepy. Whenever I'd step outside my door to smoke, if I was in clear view of his peephole, his light would suddenly go out. That yellow glow would just vanish, like he'd turned it off or blocked it. I'd go out at night, and it happened every time. I started wondering if he was watching me. One day, I went out for a cigarette and saw his peephole go dark again. I stood there smoking, staring at it, trying to catch any flicker of light to figure out if he was really at the peephole or just turning off his light by coincidence. I was standing instead of sitting, which I usually did, because I had a bad feeling that day. As I stubbed out my cigarette and put it in my ashtray, I heard his metal door creak open. My heart skipped a beat, but I told myself he was probably just taking out the trash. Then I saw him step out empty-handed, just standing there, facing me. I turned slowly, trying to act natural, and headed for my door. But as I did, he started walking toward me, cutting across the hall, past the stairs. His steps weren't aimed past me. They were angled at me. I fumbled with my key, my hand shaking, and got my door open just as he sped up, closing the gap. I slipped inside, slammed the door shut, and locked it, my heart pounding. I couldn't see through my broken peephole, but I didn't hear him keep walking past or go back to his place. He was just there on the other side. Then I saw my door handle jiggle slightly, like he was trying to open it. I froze, barely breathing, wondering what the hell he wanted. After what felt like forever, maybe 30 seconds, I heard him turn and walk back to his apartment, his door clanking shut. I was shaking, totally freaked out, so I called a guy friend from school. He offered to come over, but he lived far, and it was late, so I said I'd be okay. He stayed on the phone with me for a while, calming me down. During our call, he suggested I test the guy by opening and closing my door to see if he'd come out again. I did it, slamming it hard, and sure enough, I heard his door creak open and shut, like he was checking why he heard me, but didn't see me. That confirmed it. He was watching me. I started experimenting, leaving my room quietly to smoke, and his peephole stayed lit when I was sneaky. But if I closed my door normally after, I'd hear his open, and sometimes he'd come stand outside my door, probably listening. One night, I was smoking outside when he came home. I froze, watching him out of the corner of my eye. He didn't go inside, just stood there staring at his door for way longer than normal. I finished my cigarette, my hands trembling, and he finally went in. There was another weird thing I can't 100% pin on him, but I'm pretty damn sure it was his doing. When it rained, I'd smoke in the stairwell by my door, the one that led to nothing, because the rain would hit me otherwise. I'd leave my ashtray on the third step, tucked in the corner by the wall, since it was a bit smelly. One night, I left it there, went inside, and closed my door normally. The next morning, I went to grab it, and it wasn't on the third step anymore. It was a couple of steps higher, right in the middle, with a cigarette butt and a crumpled pack of my brand next to it. Nobody else used those stairs. My neighbors on the right used the other stairwell, and the Chinese couple and the creep used the laundry stairs. Plus, those stairs weren't even visible unless you walked around the corner by my room. It felt like a message, and it creeped me out. All this was happening over the last few months of 2015 and into early 2016. The final straw came one night when I was out for dinner with my boyfriend. We got back after 11 p.m., and the apartment gate locks after 11, so you need a key. I was walking faster than my boyfriend, turning the corner to the gate, when I saw a figure standing in the shadows, watching me approach. He started moving out of the darkness toward me. My boyfriend rounded the corner just then, and the guy pulled out his phone, pretending to talk to someone, but it was so obvious he was faking it. We stayed quiet, on edge, as we got to the gate. I was digging in my bag for my keys when the guy said, "Excuse me," and lurched forward, unlocking the gate with his own key. He stood on the other side, like he was waiting to see if my boyfriend would come in with me or leave. I held up my keys and said, "Thanks, I'll lock it," and he reluctantly walked off, heading up the laundry stairs. We watched him go, and I didn't realize it was my neighbor until I saw which stairs he took. I peeked around the corner to his apartment, and there he was, standing outside his door, staring at it, not moving. He noticed me, turned, and just stared until he saw my boyfriend behind me. Then he ducked inside, slamming his door. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I knew he was up to no good, and I wasn't about to wait for something worse to happen. I canceled my lease and moved out shortly after, leaving that creepy apartment and its even creepier neighbor behind for good. Growing up in a small town in the Pacific Northwest, I've always loved hiking. The woods around us were dense and beautiful, with trails that wound through towering pines and misty valleys. My dad raised me to be cautious out there. Bears, cougars, and the occasional weirdo were always a possibility, so I never went hiking without my pocket knife and a charged phone. When I was 19, home for the summer from college, I decided to hit one of my favorite trails, a 10-mile loop that climbed up to a lookout with killer views. It was a sunny Saturday in June, and I figured it'd be a chill day to clear my head. The trail was familiar, one I'd done dozens of times since I was a kid. It wasn't too crowded, just a few other hikers I passed early on. I had my earbuds in listening to music, but kept the volume low, like my dad taught me, so I could hear if anything was off. About 2 hours in, I was deep in the forest, maybe 3 miles from the lookout, when I noticed the air felt heavy, like the woods had gone too quiet. No birds, no rustling, just my footsteps crunching on the dirt. I pulled out my earbuds and stopped to listen. Nothing. It was eerie, but I chalked it up to my imagination and kept going. A little further up, I came across this old wooden signpost, half rotted, pointing to a side trail I'd never noticed before. It was overgrown, barely a path, with no markings on a map I had on my phone. I'm not one to wander off the main trail. Dad's warnings about getting lost were drilled into me, but something about it pulled me in. I figured I'd just take a quick look, maybe 10 minutes, and turn back. The path was narrow, with branches scratching at my arms, and it led to a small clearing with a rusted fire pit and some scattered rocks, like someone had camped there ages ago. That's when I saw him, a guy sitting on one of the rocks, staring at the ground. He was maybe in his 30s, wearing a faded flannel and jeans that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. He didn't seem to notice me at first, so I cleared my throat and said, "Hey, you okay?" He looked up slowly, his eyes weirdly blank, and just nodded. "Just resting," he said, his voice low and gravelly. I got a bad vibe right away, but I didn't want to seem rude, so I nodded back and said, "Cool, just checking." I started to turn back when he stood up and said, "You shouldn't be out here alone." My stomach twisted. I forced a smile and said, "I'm good, thanks," and started walking back to the main trail, picking up my pace. I heard footsteps behind me, crunching on the leaves, way too close. I glanced over my shoulder, and he was following me, not running but moving fast, his face still blank. My heart was pounding now, and I gripped my pocket knife in my jacket. "Hey, I'm fine, you don't need to follow me," I called out, trying to sound firm. He didn't answer, just kept coming. I broke into a jog, weaving through the trees, hoping to lose him as I hit the main trail. The footsteps kept up for a bit, then stopped. I didn't dare look back, just kept moving until I reached the lookout, where a couple of other hikers were eating lunch. I was shaking, trying to play it cool, but I told them about the guy. They hadn't seen anyone like that, but said they'd keep an eye out. I didn't stick around at the lookout long. I hiked back down, checking over my shoulder every few minutes, my nerves shot. When I got to the trailhead, my car was the only one in the lot, and there was no sign of the guy. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about that clearing, that path, that guy. I told my dad about it later, and he said there'd been rumors of strange folks living off-grid in those woods, but no one ever confirmed it. I haven't gone back to that trail since. I keep wondering who he was, why he followed me, and what would have happened if I hadn't gone back to the main trail when I did. All I know is I'm sticking to busier paths from now on.